Christianity and science. You've probably heard they're bitter rivals, right? Locked in this epic, centuries-long battle. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the real story is something totally different? An unlikely alliance, even a surprisingly productive one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? Are science and religion just destined to be at war? Is that conflict just baked in? That's definitely the story we hear all the time. But the source material we're digging into today, it paints a completely different picture.
So let's break this down. You've got two completely opposite stories. On one hand, there's the conflict narrative. This is the one we all know. Science versus faith, winner takes all. But then there's this other idea, this supportive relationship. And this one's wild. It suggests that actually, Christian faith wasn't a roadblock for science. It was more like the soil where science really started to grow. So which one is it? Let's check out the history.
Okay, so a supportive alliance instead of a war? How does that even work? Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, right there in the history books. And believe me, it's a history that might just flip the script on everything you thought you knew. Just take a look at this. We tend to think of the Middle Ages as the Dark Ages, especially for science. But in the church, not so much. Monasteries were basically the hard drives of their time, preserving and copying all this crucial knowledge. Then you jump ahead to the scientific revolution, the big one. And guess what? So many of those groundbreaking discoveries were happening in a deeply Christian world. And that connection, that conversation, it's still going on today. And this right here just nails the point home. We're not talking about minor players. We're talking about the absolute giants, the founders of modern science. Galileo, Newton, these guys didn't see some big conflict. For them, it was the total opposite. Their faith, their belief in an intelligent creator was the very thing that pushed them, that drove them to figure out how it all worked. And check this out, because this gets really specific. The church wasn't just sitting back and letting things happen. No way. It was an active player. It was building Europe's first universities, funding libraries, setting up observatories, all the stuff you absolutely need for science to happen. Which, of course, leads to the big question, why? Why would they do that?
Okay, so we've seen what happened in history. Now let's get into the why. What was it about this worldview that made it such a good launchpad for science?
A huge piece of the puzzle is this idea called natural theology. It's pretty straightforward, really. The thinking goes, you can learn about the artist by studying their art. So, if God created the universe, then studying the universe, the creation, is a way to understand God. It turns science into this really amazing, even spiritual quest.
And this one verse from the book of Proverbs was a huge deal for these early scientists. It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings is to search things out. See what it's doing? It's framing the universe as a mystery to be solved, a giant, glorious puzzle. And the act of searching things out, doing science, is presented as this noble, awesome thing to do. So here's the bottom line. For science to even work, you have to believe something pretty fundamental, that the universe is orderly, that it follows rules, that it makes sense. And the argument here is that this idea was already built right into the Christian worldview. The belief was in a God of order, not chaos. And an orderly God would create an orderly universe, one that we could actually figure out using the minds we were given.
All right, so that's the history. But what about now? Does any of this old school worldview have anything to say about the crazy cutting-edge science of today?
Well, let's take a look. We're going to jump into a few different fields where our source material points out some really interesting connections between what scientists are finding right now and this very old way of looking at the world.
Okay, first up, cosmology. The Big Bang. The big idea here is that our universe isn't eternal. It had a beginning. And that idea of a definite beginning lines up really neatly with a worldview that talks about a specific moment of creation. Then you have physics, and this mind-bending idea called the anthropic principle. Basically, scientists have realized that the laws of our universe, like gravity for instance, are fine-tuned with insane precision. If they were off by even a tiny, tiny fraction, life couldn't exist. For some, this fine-tuning doesn't look like an accident. It looks like purpose. Now let's zoom in from the huge to the super tiny. Quantum mechanics. This field completely blew up the old idea of the universe as a predictable machine. It showed us a reality that's based on probability, not certainty. And it even suggests that consciousness, the act of observing, plays a role. That really challenges a purely materialistic view of everything. And finally, biology. When we discovered DNA, we found this incredibly complex digital code, literal software, running inside every living cell. It's a level of information that for some points to an intelligence behind it. And as we learn more about the brain and consciousness through neuroscience, we're finding it's so complex that it still leaves the door open for ideas beyond just the physical. Maybe even something like a soul.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it's not about finding one final perfect answer. It's about seeing this as a living, breathing conversation that's still going on. The perspective we've been exploring really boils down to this: harmony. It's the idea that science and faith aren't enemies fighting over the same territory. They're more like partners asking different but equally important questions. Science is our amazing tool for figuring out the how. How do planets orbit? How does DNA work? But faith, in this view, is what helps us explore the why. Why is there anything here at all?
And that's where we'll leave it, with a really cool question to think about. As our science gets more and more powerful, as we look deeper into space and into the very building blocks of life, where are science and faith going to meet next? What does that next chapter look like? Honestly, that's a story that we are all watching get written right now.